You stay with us, Rosangela, anyway, because we're going to switch directly on the round table. We had imagined a brief break to organize ourselves, but the excellent moderators of the round table are already ready. And as we're very short of time, we're going to start the round table right now, so you can stay connected. And we will have a break. I say that for everyone. It is anyway planned. We'll have a break in about 45 minutes at the end of the roundtable. Anyway, I also remind you that you can use the question window on the bottom right of your screen to ask questions to the panelists. So this roundtable, which game-changing tools are needed for a multi-scale approach? Still with Rosangela Tozzoli, as I said, and Fabrice Vavre, that we heard just before. And with us, Andrian Muwonge, Chancellor's Fellow on Digital One Health at the Royal Dick School of Veterinary Studies, Gwenaël Vourc'h, Deputy Director of Joint Research Unit dedicated to the epidemiology of animal and zoonotic diseases at the INRAE, and Angus Cameron, your Director of Ausvet. And to moderate this round table, Jean-Philippe Rasigade, you're a clinical microbiologist at the Lyon University Hospital, medical teacher and researcher at the University of Lyon. Your research group focuses on the evolution and ecology of antimicrobial resistant bacteria, especially in hospital settings. And Natalia Bomchil, you're a microbiologist by training. You joined Lyon Biopol in January 2020 as innovation manager. You coordinate technical and scientific program and support the emergence and founding of collaborative R&D projects. You served previously as head of the research group in vaccinology at Boehringer Ingelheim. So now I give you the floor for this roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabrice, and thank you very much to the presenters. Many fascinating topics have been presented during the talks, and so it is now time to discuss these topics in more depth with the audience and with the experts in several fields who have joined us for this roundtable session. So Andrian Muwonge is a molecular microbiologist who develops surveillance networks in Uganda and other countries using digital tools. Gwenaël Vourc'h is specialized in innovative design in research and livestock health, and she studies the transmission of Lyme disease and the chikungunya virus. And Angus Cameron is a One Health epidemiologist focusing on health information systems in humans and livestock in more than 50 countries. So we can now begin our discussion of the tools required for true multi-scale approaches of a One Health surveillance and action program. And we can start with questions from the audience. First, regarding the talk of Fabrice Vavre on the infectious initiative, we had a question by Patrice Udelet. Is this infectious framework integrated in more global networks? And do you have or do you plan to have close partnerships with similar centers in other parts of the globe, especially in endemic countries or the countries that are emergent hotspots? Can you elaborate on that, Fabrice, please?
Yes. So there are different things about that. So maybe the first one is that, of course, the different partners of Infectiotron are involved in different networks. And this is, of course, something that will be very important to develop this kind of interactions. Maybe one example is there is this network in Europe, the Isidore network. I don't know if you know it. I'm not the best person to talk about it, but the idea is that this is network that put together the different infrastructures, experimental infrastructures working, for example, with insectarium of confined environment, BSL-3 labs, etc., etc. So this is interesting to think about the possibility to have these kind of networks to share the competencies around these specific tools and equipment. So this is something important, but is rather, once again, very, very pragmatic. And then, Thibaut, I could talk about Thibaut Porphyre that came recently on the chair Santé Publique Vétérinaire, and who has quite a lot of connections with different countries, especially in Scotland, but also in Africa. So these are the kinds of networks that we will use, of course, to conjointly develop things at the international level.
Thank you, Fabrice. And while we are speaking about networks, I have another question regarding the differences in building networks in different parts of the world. I'm not sure Andrian is with us.
Yes, I am. It's just that my
okay, I could not see your. Okay, and. So both Fabrice's talk and Dr. Tozzoli's talk highlighted the importance and the challenges of building networks for data acquisition and surveillance, and beyond building networks after being appointed by a central institutions. So Andrian, can you share your experience of building such networks in veterinary settings and in other parts of the world, not only Europe?
Thank you to the organizers for having me here. And I apologize about my camera. The settings haven't allowed me to be seen. So the work that I do is broadly categorized as digital One Health, and really what we're trying to do is to find a common ground or platforms where data can be collected and shared and used for decision making across different disciplines, taking into account the differences in ethical limitations that comes with such data. And the work that I do is really mostly in Africa and starting off in Uganda, and we are using tools working together with the private sector, specifically with AMR, to be able to collect data about antibiotic use in these settings. Because if we are to sit on the table with our medical colleagues and the colleagues from the environment, the veterinary side has limited data really on the antibiotic use. And there isn't specifically funding that really allows for that to happen. So we have to really find innovative ways of incorporating abilities for us to track the use of antibiotics on farms within projects that are funded. For example, we have a project that is funded by Innovate UK to support data-driven decision-making in breeding for pigs in Uganda. And this is really an upstream aspect about on the farm. But it allows us to interact with farmers through this extension service provider, who's a private company. And that allows really to follow the use of antibiotics almost at individual level in an area that has close to 1.5 million pigs. But of that, they have a catchment of about 300,000. And so that allows us really to track or have some data that can show us how much antibiotics are used in the livestock sector, specifically pigs. But my experience that there isn't specific funding that allows us to do this in a One Health context. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So it looks like finding funding for the question you have in hand is not always easy, but sometimes you can find funding for other questions and build tools for this other question and repurpose these tools. I think this is something that happens quite frequently when building networks and tools. And more broadly, the tools you mentioned can really facilitate the surveillance in many fields, so beyond antibiotic resistance. And for instance, Angus Cameron, you're working in several fields, several countries. Do you think such tools can help for broader surveillance questions? I mean, digital tools and the deployment of digital tools in other parts of the world? I think you're muted, Angus. Oh, we still can't hear us. So perhaps the next question is still for Andrian. How did you switch? How did you have the idea to switch from tools funded initially for over questions to these tools applied to antibiotic usage surveillance? How did the idea emerge?
I think it came out of frustration, to be honest, because we tried a number of times to acquire funding to do this sort of work. And of course, at this time, AMR was the big problem that the international community was talking about, but the funders were not really, they are not yet warmed up to funding these aspects. And rightly so, because we really don't have a unified platform for the veterinary, human, and environment with agreed optimum ethical levels for data sharing. And so that means it becomes difficult really to fund such ventures, because it's automatic that everybody will go back to their silos, collect data, and only bring it back. So I had an opportunity to build this project, Pig Boost, that I've talked to you about, but also another project building market intelligence tools for pork, and basically providing real-time information about the prices of pork for farmers to make decisions on where and how to sell their animals. Now, within this tool, we also started tracking the prices of antibiotics, because that is really a motivator for a farmer deciding to use antibiotics or not, because they're not free. And so that information will tell us about the motivation for buying antibiotics, and the information that comes from the other tool, which really goes to the farm and looks at the animal, tells us how the antibiotics are used. So it means when we sit on the table with our medical colleagues and environmental colleagues, we can clearly say this is what is happening, and we have the data to support it.
Thank you. So this is really a fascinating example of how you can find solutions to complex problems step by step. And I think Dr. Vourc'h, he's a specialist in finding solutions and innovating solutions. Dr. Vourc'h, you have experienced similar problems in your field for finding solutions and building tools. Could you comment on the methods you use and the tools you have to facilitate the emergence of innovative solutions when you face the same kind of problems as Andrian Muwonge faced?
Yes, thank you. Frustration and reaction to frustration is a good way to find a solution and move forward. But in my field, in my work, I wanted I was also frustrating that we kind of have the same idea around, even if we combine with multiple disciplines. So I started to look for ways to overcome this. And since a few years, since 10 years, I collaborate with people working on innovative design. And that's helped to, the idea is to have a method based on a theory that helps generating new ideas, but not out of the blue, kind of by luck, which can happen, and but to try to find conditions to generate this idea. And this is particularly relevant in situations when you're not sure where you want to go. You want to go somewhere, you think it's very important, but you're not sure. You're not sure which knowledge you need to ask, you need to look for. And also you're not sure how many people and which discipline you need. So that's, if I take a basic example. If you want to improve something, you can have to choose and to go step by step. For example, you want to go to a nice movie night, then you choose between the different movies that are available. And if you are in a situation where you want to explore new thing, it's like, okay, let's do a amazing party. Then you have all kind of possibilities, but you're not sure where to go. So in the first, in a more like step by step, you will work on with decision. You improve your program, you optimize, and you combine different solutions. And in the other situation, you need to generate ideas and to go around fixation, because when people have new ideas, they usually come up with some thought that it's a cognitive bias. You go to the same idea. So we applied that for different topics for to build new research program for AMR in livestock and also for prevention of Lyme disease. And the interesting thing is several things. First, we have an overview of the different tools or approach we could combine. For example, for Lyme disease, we look for different ideas and go a step beyond each time. So we have ideas for prevention using ticks and against tick with claws that are repulsive and that are used by the public. So that was a few years ago, kind of now it's going on the market, this kind of tools. And then the other spectrum of prevention, of course, there was tools to improve diagnostic of Lyme disease, but going one step on the side, you think, okay, some people think they have Lyme disease, but you don't have the right markers. And in fact, at the end, not sure whether they have Lyme disease or not. There's kind of conflicts between medical approach and patient approach. So you go around the problem and say, let's take care of the people who have these symptoms, whatever diagnostic we have. So it's kind of another step aside to integrate the situation. So that's an example we used. So the message is that it can generate new ideas and a panel idea and give you an overview of a complex program, which usually One Health programs are typically complex programs.
Thank you very much, Gwenaël. And I think what you're saying about the innovative design and the way to obtain more elaborated tools can also be linked to another question from the audience. If we go back to the use of antibiotics, there is an important question, which is to which extent numeric tools could help to fill the gap between surveillance and stewardship. That is the gap from data collection to action and feedback to the people who provided the data. I think it's the question. But perhaps Angus, if your microphone is working.
How is that now?
Yes, it is. Okay. Yes, it is. I think you're really the right person to address this question.
Okay. Thank you, Jean-Philippe. I think it's a fascinating and really important question, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to contribute to the earlier discussions. But this idea of being able to use the digital tools, which may have been developed in the first case for one particular specific objective, but then to be guided, as Gwenaël touched on, by the whether it's a formal approach or in the past we've maybe done what Gwenaël would call by accident, coming up with approaches by listening and being guided by the users to expand the range of data that's being collected and give access to new data. But with this specific question, it's something actually that we're working on at the moment. And I've thought was very important in the area of antimicrobial stewardship, because we put a lot of effort into surveillance. We want to make sure that we understand what drugs are being used by different players, and whether it's for clinical usage by veterinarians or other usage by producers. So we want to understand what is being used. We also need to understand why it's being used. What is the decision process behind that usage, so we can understand, is it prudent, is it responsible usage, or is this usage that should be discouraged or modified? A lot of the systems that we work with, and I think Andrian as well, are really aiming on using digital tools for real-time data capture. And so this is trying to understand people's decisions and what drugs they might be using in the case of antibiotic usage surveillance at the time they are making that treatment decision. So the project, one of the projects that we're working on at the moment, is to leverage these real-time data capture tools to then provide real-time stewardship feedback. And so it's to try and close that loop. It's a remarkable challenge, because the fact that somebody has chosen to use antibiotics for a particular case, it's quite difficult to be sure that one's recommendations to determine whether that's appropriate usage or not. But we're using a whole lot of local expertise, trying to capture the understanding and knowledge of local clinicians in different livestock species, capture national treatment guidelines, and use some Bayesian algorithms to support computer-aided diagnostics to guide improved usage decisions. So that the objective simply is not simply to use the tools that we're developing for surveillance and to help inform top-level decision-making, but bring that decision-making capacity down to the individual people that are taking action in the field, so that this dream of real-time stewardship and actually influencing the problem at the same time as measuring the problem is one of the directions we're trying to go at the moment.
This is excellent direction, but what is your opinion of a delay before we can have some tools deployed and active? What do you think? Well,
it's the foundation of the approach that we're working on was actually done by a PhD student of mine in 2006, 2005. So the foundations are there. But we're working, we've got funding for a project in Vietnam and Indonesia at the moment, and we've got another PhD student working on this. So and it's his work on the interacting with the experts to gather the probability tables has started. So we're looking at maybe a time of 2 or 3 years before we start seeing results, which is too slow, but that's the pace that things move sometimes.
Yes, this is research. So I understand that the foundations are here, the mathematical developments need to be done, but there can be many other issues and challenges and obstacles when trying to develop such tools in production. And we all understand that these digital tools can really help surveillance, but there must be also difficult challenge regarding the privacy of data, the compliance to GDPR in Europe and so on, and the challenges can even be different in human and animal settings. So how do you cope with the ethical and legal issues during the design phase of the digital tools, Angus?
Huge problem. And variable. I think there's clearly a large difference in the legal framework and also the social importance and awareness of privacy issues. So between Europe and other similar countries with GDPR level controls, and many of the low and middle income countries that we're working in. Globally, there's an increasing awareness of the concerns about privacy, but they are still at very different levels. There has been a situation in the past, working in low and middle income countries, where in the absence of strong regulatory frameworks, people working with data and developing new systems had great liberty, which meant that things could be developed quickly, but that also represents a danger that there was very little control. I think these challenges need to be addressed at the very beginning of new initiatives for data collection, for improved surveillance approaches. But the challenge is one of awareness and maturity of systems. And so again, in lower and middle income countries, often those charged with regulating or imposing the types of controls that are necessary are relatively inexperienced or unfamiliar, and don't necessarily see the awareness. There's been, for instance, within governments, there's been a long history of government control of data. We limit how it's used, we make the rules, and that's the end of it. However, I think the trend we are seeing, and there's been plenty of discussion of this during the last day and a half, of the need to integrate with private sector data sources. And so commercial production data sets from intensive production systems as incredibly valuable sources of surveillance information. Suddenly the game is changing for a lot of governments, and they are now in a position where they're forced to grapple with the complexities of data governance and to negotiate the rules around where data comes from, who owns the data, who controls the data, what it can be used for, and put those types of limits on. So I see the environment is becoming more complicated, but I see it as a very positive thing, the increasing involvement of the private sector, because it forces our public institutions to rethink their approaches and to take a much more collaborative and purposeful approach to data governance.
Thank you. So you mentioned the integration with a private sector, and when we think about data privacy and the risk of reuse of data because of commercial value, do you think that integrating private sectors with a project is a strength or a weakness when dealing with data privacy issues? Can they help, or are they even a danger? What do you think?
Jean-Philippe, if you're asking me, I think it increases the complexity, but it's absolutely essential. The private sectors at many scales, whether it's an individual smallholder with 5 chickens or 2 cattle, or whether it's a large integrated production company with 500 farms and millions of animals. That is where the production is happening. That is where the disease risk is generated. This is where the data is coming from. If we do not work with these organizations, we do not have access to the information we need, either to understand disease or threats, or to impact on it. So it's not really a choice. Life may be more complicated by working with them, but it's essential.
Thank you. So you are really convincing all of us that we have to treat with the private sector as an essential partner. There is another question from the audience. I think that might be interesting to Andrian Muwonge about what was the experience in dealing with the Nagoya protocol when developing innovative tools. As long as we gather, I'm just defining the Nagoya protocol, as long as we gather genetic information or organisms from other countries, we have to deal with international regulation that are the Nagoya protocol. Andrian, did you have to deal with issues or other things regarding the Nagoya protocol when you build and deployed your tools in Uganda or elsewhere?
We have not yet reached at the point where we are collecting a biological material that we then use to for any part of research. Actually, what is happening for us is really to understand part of what Cameron has talked about, how we how we work alongside private sector, because they allow, they have because to gather data, there has to be a motivation as to why a person would use a tool. Now, the private sector has a motivation to actually make their work efficient. The farmer also needs to get as much information about what is happening on their farm, but also the tool allows them to understand, to make decisions on their farm. So there's a motivation as to why they would use that tool. And so research and or any other entities, it would really glide on that relationship and harness it for the greater good, of generating data that is usable for public health. But as part of the work that we've done with COVID, really, because there we're developing, digital contact tracing tools specific for haulage. The primary question that we are preoccupied with is, what are the prerequisites that ensure that the tool delivers the public health good, but also remain ethically, legally, and socially defensible to use it. So, and that is a really difficult question to work with if you don't have all the stakeholders on board. But by understanding that, actually, really that feeds into making sure that things like the Nagoya Protocol remain, people respect and do work according to those protocols.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrian. So we've been talking about innovation, innovating design, and innovating tools, and there is a very profound question from the audience, and the question is, we are always asked for innovative tools, but do they really respond to needs? And I think this is a question for Gwenaël regarding innovative design. How do we make sure that innovation does not go beyond what we really need?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are two things. The first one is really to make sure that where we want to go is desirable, is really something we would like to do. And that's in innovative design, we work on what we call an initial concept. And that is something that is not really known, you're not sure what it is, but you want to reach that. And that's an important point. Otherwise, you can just do innovation for innovation, do new things that maybe accidentally they will be used. Sometimes it works, but and the other thing is during the process is important to include all kind of actors, and especially the actors that will be use the tool or the innovation, or which are concerned by this innovation, and but to include them in such a way that they are also prepared to explore new things and to see new ideas. And so to do that, you need to bring them with knowledge and with a way to explore new ideas. So it's really the two points that are important in innovating design is to generate new ideas based on knowledge. It's not like based on creativity skills of the people. It's also to bring knowledge, but to bring them in and then to have them think and work in such a way that they can explore new ideas. And that's where you bring example from another fields, for example.
Thank you, Gwenaël. So if I understand correctly, the innovative design framework includes safeguards against an excess of innovation beyond the needs. You also have to involve all the stakeholders to keep on to keep being on tracks. There are several questions that have been just typed in the question chat that are linked with integration of data and the multiplication of tools. Some question I think we have already answered in part this question, because the question was do the multiplication of tools does it go against the goal of having an integration of all sectors in the One Health? If we have several different tools, at one point we have to integrate them. And this leads to the second and possibly more important question of what are the challenges for the data integration between surveillance systems. This can be a question for Dr. Tozzoli, because this is clearly central to surveillance in Europe and elsewhere.
Yes, okay, thanks for the question. Actually, it is very, very much important, the integration of the data that are obtained in the different sectors. And this is really a key issue that needs to be addressed to work in One Health. And this means that, for instance, the level of discrimination that is reached by scientists working in each separate sector, for instance, should be probably the same, because otherwise it would be difficult to make comparable the data that are obtained. And so I think that this is really a striking, it is really very much important, and it is a challenge. If I can add something about the innovative tools, I think that once that we decide that there is the need to design a new innovative tool, this of course should have an added value, considering, for instance, the performance, the targets, or also the affordability, or the possibility to work in the field with this new tool. So in this respect, I just wanted to add that, of course, there is the possibility to design whatever we want, because if we look at the research, there are these very many possibilities. But I also wanted to make sure that, in my opinion, if we want to talk about innovation, of course, we have to consider that what we are deploying is going really to give an added value. And in this sense, also talking about integration, it is very, very much important, in my opinion, that the data are made comparable. So for instance, what I was telling you about the collaboration of the European Reference Laboratory, which is working in the food safety sector, it is crucial that you have collaboration also with the other sectors. And this is something that we are trying to address every day, for instance, with the ECDC working in public health. And in this respect, we have also decided to carry out some joint proficiency tests for the laboratories working in the food sector and in the human public health sector, in order to have the characterization, for instance, of the same set of strains, and to try and reach a sort of alignment of the methodologies and of the power of discrimination of the sectors. So yes, thanks for this question. It is really crucial issue to find the possibility to integrate the data.
Thank you. So you mentioned the issue, the challenge, and the objective of comparability or interoperability of the data, and this is especially important in surveillance. I mean, official surveillance networks. But we have also much talked about digital tools in which data are directly provided by the end users. So these kind of tools generate massive amounts of data, and the more data we have, the more likely we will run into quality or reliability issues at some point. And how can we improve data quality and assess this quality in a large-scale collection task? What's your opinion on that, Rosangela?
I think that one of the key points that may be exploited is, of course, the training of the people who are going to use these tools. This is really an important tool that we can use, and that needs to be applied in order to have the possibility to make the end users gain expertise in using these tools. But I also think that there is the possibility that to carry out external quality assessments that could actually give a clear picture of the applicability of the methods on the proficiency of the operators that are applying these methods. So in this respect, I think that the external quality assessment could assist.
Thank you. And indeed, all these discussions of data quality, we've been talking about collecting data from the field, but at some point in initiatives such as the infectious initiative presented by Fabrice, all these data can also help to design sampling methods or things like that. Fabrice, can you elaborate on how data collection from the field can help sampling the right organisms to perform more costly experiments or analyses?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe in very general terms, I would say that the surveillance data are, of course, very important because they can also tell us some specific hypotheses, and these specific hypotheses, then we should test them to get the mechanisms underlying, I don't know, for example, transmission between different species. And that's also probably related to innovation, because when we are able to identify and test specific mechanisms, maybe we can also test whether the innovations we propose are responding to the mechanisms underlying specific interactions. And more generally, I guess that there is also this idea that we need to develop specific methods to integrate. So One Health is a very big thing where we should be able to scale up from molecules to individuals, populations, ecosystems. And the methodology that we have at the moment is not able to scale up all these different scales. And despite this is very important if we want to integrate everything. So I guess that there are very strong efforts to develop this kind of both ability to analyze statistically data from these different levels, but also to model and make projections based on these data at different scales. And this is quite difficult because we can just think about the individual level, where only at this stage we should be able to integrate physiology, behavior, and so it's already a very big challenge. So yeah, I guess that to be able to define the right thing to do, we also need to have this big view, and we need to have a very strong development in statistics and mathematics to understand that.
So do you think that mathematicians or biostatistical teams should be more tightly involved with One Health initiatives such as the infectious?
Well, we try to involve them. We have colleagues, for example, from EPIA, from the LBBE, which are dealing with the development of this kind of methods, and this is crucial. This is crucial because understanding the functioning of these complex systems requires that we can model them.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabrice. Thank you very much, everybody. I see time is running, and we promised to preserve the second pause and not skip it like the first pause. So I'm giving the floor back to Fabrice Papillon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Philippe, and thank you, Natalia, for moderating this wonderful timed round table. And thank you, Andrian, Gwenaël, Rosangela, Fabrice, and Angus for your participation.